Denuvo Anti-Tamper is a gamer-unfriendly piece of software. As a product, Denuvo is an anti-piracy digital rights management program that many publishers and developers fuse to the code of the PC versions of their games in order to prevent potential online pirates from subsequently cracking the code of their games and spreading them to piracy sites for mass illegal download. And for that reason, publishers love Denuvo, because in theory, it deters piracy and ensures that the only way to play a game is through legal means, which in turn, in theory, leads to maximized sales. But in practice, Denuvo is incredibly controversial, because while publishers view Denuvo as a great asset, gamers and customers hate Denuvo, and they do so for 4 core reasons. Firstly, Denuvo doesn't necessarily cause an increase in sales, mostly because piracy alone doesn't necessarily mean a lost sale, because those pirates may or may not have bought the game at all to begin with. There's just a lot of hypotheticals there, so equating an illegally downloaded game to be the equivalent of a lost sale is a bit of a stretch, because we just don't know for a fact that those pirates would have bought the game to begin with. It is definitely a logical fallacy. Secondly, Denuvo doesn't prevent a game's code from being cracked. It is only a stopgap solution meant to temporarily delay the game from being cracked during its new release window, meaning that even with Denuvo, the game will eventually be cracked and spread to pirate sites. It is inevitable. Thirdly, Denuvo is very hit and miss. While some games with Denuvo, like Assassin's Creed Origins, remained uncracked for 99 whole days, there are other instances like Doom 2016 where the game was cracked on the day of release. And with that, Denuvo truly does have a spotty track record. And fourthly, and most importantly, Denuvo lowers a game's overall performance quality, especially on lower-end PCs. See, games with Denuvo feature a lower average frame rate when compared to the frame rate of the same game that is not running Denuvo, meaning that these versions lacking Denuvo run smoother and are thus by definition superior to the versions with Denuvo. In other words, Denuvo actively decreases the overall quality of the end product, which honestly and very ironically only makes piracy a more tempting option. After all, pirated PC versions of games like Resident Evil Village actively run better than the legally acquired versions due to how the purchased copy comes with Denuvo, and the fact that the stolen copy of the game runs better and stutters less frequently than the legally purchased one on PC only further makes the case for piracy rather than act as a true deterrent, because truly Denuvo actively makes games worse, which is something that many developers are even aware of, given that they often patch out Denuvo when it has already been cracked, because there's no point in keeping a piece of software that decreases a game's overall quality when it no longer serves a purpose. That just makes sense. So to recap, Denuvo may or may not boost a game's sales, it only temporarily prevents a game from being cracked, some games are cracked in short order, and it actively reduces the quality of the games it is included in, to the point that the pirated version is often the superior product in terms of overall quality. And with all those reasons, and probably some others, Denuvo is an almost useless piece of software that lessens the overall experience for the end user. You know, the people who actually end up paying for the games. And due to this, gamers overall hate Denuvo. It is controversial in even the best of times, and in the worst of times, it is a damn pariah, which is honestly why we are discussing Denuvo Anti-Tamper today. See, the lambasted DRM has been on the receiving end of some really scathing headlines and news stories as of late, and deservedly so. On November 7th, many games on PC featuring Denuvo were entirely unplayable. In fact, newly released titles like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy and Football Manager 2022 couldn't be accessed for days, and even older titles like Shadow of the Tomb Raider were affected, and many players received a message that said server unreachable, which is notable because DRM, like Denuvo, requires the player to connect with a server that verifies that their game was legally obtained. But over last weekend, the games did not work. And given that all of these games have the shared common denominator of featuring Denuvo, many affected gamers went to the Reset Era boards, game community pages on Steam, or just the old-fashioned Twitter in order to criticize Denuvo and do a little detective work as to what went wrong here. And what they found was incredibly embarrassing for Denuvo, mostly because it appears that the issue here is that the company did not renew the domain for the website Code Fusion, which is a Denuvo-run website that verifies whether or not a copy of a given game featuring Denuvo was legally obtained by the customer. But seeing as that website was down, customers could not access the games that they bought, because they could not be verified by the website that was currently out of order. This Denuvo anti-tamper mishap was further investigated by by a PC Gamer article on the same subject. To quote, "The registration for the Code Fusion domain expired on September 24th this year, and November 7th seems to have been when the grace period for renewal ended, booting it off the DNS. It seems a likely scenario considering the domain has now been renewed and everything is back to normal." End quote. This very same PC Gamer article was eventually updated with a quote from a Denuvo spokesperson who detailed that something did go wrong with the domain. To quote, "A Denuvo domain was unreachable yesterday afternoon CET. The problem was fixed after we got notified from our automatic system control. After the fix, there was no whatsoever restriction or limitations for the games. Denuvo is working to implement further improvements to avoid such downtime in the future." End quote. The spokesperson notably avoided mentioning that Denuvo was the one who had let their domain expire, that they were the reason that customers couldn't access the games they bought. And honestly, I get why the company did not want to admit to this, because while yes, Denuvo did eventually get everything back online, this whole damn situation is really damn embarrassing for the company. After all, there is a pervasive gaming community-wide viewpoint that Denuvo actively makes PC gaming a worse overall experience that at best inconveniences paying customers and at worst can apparently make a game unplayable, even when that said game is a single-player story-based game like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. And this whole situation further proves how it is the paying customer who pays the price for Denuvo, not the pirates. And honestly, the whole situation makes me wonder what the hell Denuvo is even good for. Like, I get that the gaming industry views piracy as a problem, but the best way to combat piracy is not through inconveniencing and more or less punishing players who actually bought a game legally, because they don't deserve to have a worse overall experience than people who pirate games, and they sure as hell don't deserve to have a game they purchased unplayable because a hapless idiot of a company forgot to renew the fucking domain that is needed to exist that allows people to play the games that they bought with money. And with that, this whole situation is ridiculous. It is an embarrassment, and one that the industry hopefully should learn from, though I don't hold out much hope. Admittedly though, there is some good news regarding Denuvo. Well, not Denuvo itself, but just recent news involving Denuvo. See, Denuvo is being patched out of many games en masse. Over the past couple months, numerous games like Soul Calibur 6, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Ace Combat 7, Injustice 2, and several others have had Denuvo removed. And this is likely due to the release of some newer higher-end PC component upgrades like the Intel Alder Lake CPUs, which reportedly have compatibility issues with Denuvo. In fact, there were 32 games featuring Denuvo that were unplayable with these CPUs, because apparently even new hardware understands that Denuvo sucks. And hopefully because of this, more publishers and developers will avoid using Denuvo in the future. But still, I doubt that this will deter publishers from using Denuvo or other DRM a few years down the line, because honestly the gaming industry as a whole is obsessed with the flawed conceptual idea that a pirated copy equals a lost sale, and even with Denuvo shitting the bed with its domain or how it is incompatible with some modern PCs, this won't stop publishers from punishing their customers with inferior versions of their products due to their major crusade against piracy. It won't ultimately stop the industry from embracing the flawed promise of DRM like Denuvo. See ya. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, subscribe, ring the bell, share, and leave a comment telling me what you think about Denuvo and DRM. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, especially my high-tier ones in David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.